Hey guys, welcome back to our Love Like That Bible study. Today we are going to be beginning chapter 3 of studying how to be graceful if we're going to love like Jesus. It was too nice of a day not to come outside, and the sun is shining brightly, as you can obviously see off my Peyton Manning forehead. But you have to ignore that today because you got to show me grace. You got to live it out, guys. So here we go. These next two chapters, guys, are going to be foundational to loving like Jesus. This chapter studying about grace that we're called to give. Next chapter studying about being bold, the truth that is included in love. We tend to lean towards one or the other at the expense of the other. Some of us tend to lean more toward grace and exclude truth, and others of us tend to just want to give the truth and exclude grace. Jesus Christ is our ultimate example of how to love by being full of truth, full of grace, like John 1 talks about. But today we're going to begin our first of two sessions on studying about grace. Remember, guys, that grace is a gift. It's undeserved. It's unconditional. It comes from a heart that requires nothing in return. It's pure. There's no strings attached, and it is powerful. It is life-changing. So the two questions I want to ask is, number one, how often do we find ourselves giving grace? And number two, how often do we find ourselves needing grace? If we're honest about that second question, it's more times than we would like to admit. We're broken and we're sinful people. And even at our best, we're at a need of grace. And we serve an incredible God who gave us life-altering grace. He sent his son come into this earth to change us, to forgive us of our sins, to offer us forgiveness. He didn't ignore the ugliness of sin, but he also didn't ignore us because we were sinful. He offers that grace. And Ephesians 2 verse 8 says, "For by grace are you saved through faith. It is not from yourselves. It is a gift of God." Christ loved us in spite of us. And if we accept that unconditional, undeserved gift of grace, our lives are changed. Jesus' whole ministry was full of experience like this. One of my favorite is in John chapter 8, when all the religious leaders are so self-righteous and they're trying to trap Jesus. They brought a woman caught in adultery and trying to trap him. Does he follow the law of Moses, or does he then give permission to stone this lady? And we know the story. Jesus stoops down and he writes in the dirt, and he says, the first one who hasn't committed a sin, you throw the first stone. And one by one, they dropped the stone, and the guilty woman was given grace. Saved, not stoned, our author says, and her life was forever changed. I love the definition of grace. The Greek word is charis, which means cheerful and happy, and the Hebrew root word is chen, which means to bend or to stoop. So if you combine those two origins, you get grace is all about being happy to stoop down, to gladly become inferior to others. That don't come naturally to any of us, does it? To gladly become inferior to another. But that's exactly what Jesus did for us. That's what the gospel of grace is all about. Jesus, God, becoming man, like Philippians 2 says. And though he was like God, he took a form of a man, became a servant, became obedient to death. And he offered us grace. God is happy to give unconditional acceptance and unmerited grace to all who would receive it. And if we're honest, we know we need it. If we've received it, it's been given, and it's been given freely, and our lives have been changed. And we better never forget that's the only reason our lives have been changed, because a God of grace, offered that to us. So do we need it? You betcha. But number two, how often then do we give it? And maybe if people in our lives aren't changing, it's maybe because we're not giving grace, because grace is the biggest life changer. But I think if we're honest, we struggle to stoop down. We're quick to draw conclusions, like our author said. We struggle with different perspectives. We're slow to give the benefit of the doubt. We are conditional by nature. People have to earn our respect. They have to win our acceptance. We're quickly to dismiss them when they mess up, because being judgmental comes very easily. I believe if we're honest, criticism flows naturally. We feed on fault finding. We're so quick to keep score and not forget it. We're naturally more self-righteous than being willing to stoop, than having a humble heart. And I'm asking us as children of God, do we find ourselves doing more finger pointing Or are we willing to come around somebody and love them in their biggest time of needs? I love the little chart, and I want you guys to be honest. If 1 was graceful to a fault and 10 is judgmental by reflex, where would you put yourself right now in that meter? 1 being, oh man, I just show grace all the time, or 10, I'm judgmental. That's just what comes naturally to me. Where are we at, and how can we grow? So the questions I have for us this week to talk about: who needs grace in our lives? And it should start with, number 1, me. I need grace. I need God's grace. I need other people's grace. But then who needs my grace? Who needs grace? Number 2, how has my life been changed because of grace? We need to always go back to the cross and never forget that the only reason we are where we are today is because of grace. Number 3, whose life am I helping change because I am choosing to give them grace? We might just be surprised of whose lives might change around if we stop being so judgmental and critical about them and start showing them grace. Not excusing sin, but also not ignoring the people that God has brought into our life. It's big. So finally, how graceful are you? A wonderful chart there and great questions in pages 71 to 73. I hope you really do that this week. I know our group's going to really talk about that this week, of where we fall in these different situations. Because I think when it comes to grace, like your author says, we can be very naive and be very deceive ourselves, and though we may be thinking we're giving way more grace than we are. And the facts are our friends, and we need to understand, am I truly a gracious person, or am I a more judgmental person? We need to be clear, because I love the quote that he says, self-deception is the stepping stone for self-righteousness. I don't want to have blind spots in my life. I want to see my heart, that which is so deceptive. I want to see it the way I need to see it, for God to show me what there might be there that he needs to get rid of, so I can be more gracious to others. The more I'm receiving his grace, the more I can give his grace. So this week, guys, let's really study that. Let's take that step to becoming more graceful in our lives. Hope you have a great study talking through these things.